Okay, so welcome to our Graduate Entry Medicine online open afternoon. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Dave McCartney. I'm Director of the Graduate Entry Medicine Programme here in Oxford. I'm joined also this afternoon by Richard Harrington, Dr. Richard Harrington, who's Associate Course Director. Welcome, Richard.
Hi, hello, good afternoon.
You introduce yourself a bit later on, and I think we'll be hearing more from you as we go through the afternoon and learn a bit more about the clinical course. Just to talk you through the timings for this afternoon, we'll run this open afternoon until roughly about 3:30. They go on slightly longer, and you can see we'll start with the talk from myself and Richard, and then we'll move on to a separate session where we'll hear from the students as well. Richard, do you want to tell us a bit more about what you'll talk about?
Oh, yes, and actually just to piggyback on to what you were saying, David, we'll also hear from Tom, one of the alumni of the course, giving us a fairly long view. I'll be mainly talking about the clinical aspects of particularly the first year of the grad entry course, and subsequently some of the allied features of the course related to that behavioural sciences module, and also giving you what I'm going to describe as a few pearls of wisdom. Other views are available.
Fantastic. So we look forward to hearing a bit more from you later on this afternoon. And as you're listening into the talks and the presentations, do feel free to post some questions in the Q&A box that you'll see at the side of the screen, and we'll try and pick some of those up as we go through this afternoon. I know some people have also sent in some questions in advance, which again, we'll try and pick up some of the questions that people have submitted in advance and hopefully give you some answers to some of those questions. But right at the end as well, we'll have a brief question and answer panel and the opportunity to hear again from current students and also one of our former students as well. So that's the outline for this afternoon. Behind the scenes, we've got one of our administrators, academic administrators, James McBain, who's taking care of the IT side of things. So thanks, James, for joining us. Hopefully keeping things running smoothly this afternoon. So over the next 30, 45 minutes or so, we'll have a look at the particular features of this graduate entry medicine course here in Oxford, and tell you a bit more about the programme, tell you a bit more about what to expect if you were to start here in Oxford. I'll talk a bit about how to apply to the course, how to make an application, and what sort of things you need to do to submit an application. I'll then move on to talk a little bit about how we select people to offer places to and what that process looks like, and cover a little bit about interviews here in Oxford and what to expect if you were to be invited for interviews. So quite broad-ranging talk, and hopefully cover some useful and helpful things and help you work out over the course of this afternoon if this is the right course for you, and if it is, work out the details of what you want to do to apply. Hopefully many of you know some of these details already. It's a 4-year programme in contrast to our 6-year standard entry programme. So it's a 4-year accelerated course where we really hit the ground running day one of the first year. So we'll talk a bit more about what first year looks like in the next couple of slides. What's the course look like in terms of size? Well, actually, we're a relatively small course compared to some other courses in the UK and elsewhere. So it's a relatively small cohort, usually a cohort of about 40 or so students. There is an emphasis on students guiding their own learning. We obviously give you some teaching, give you some seminars and some practical classes, and also lots of clinical placements as you move through the programme. But also we expect you as adult learners to take responsibility for your own learning and how you work through the material that you'll need to cover to graduate successfully at the end of the course. We integrate quite early with clinical science, so we try and integrate the academic component with the clinical component early on. And in order to do that, we offer you some early clinical experiences. So in first year, you'll have clinical placements, general practice, hospitals, those will form an important part of your learning and integrate well with the academic teaching that you have in Oxford. And the clinical exposure continues throughout the course, and as you progress through the programme, your time on clinical placement will increase. So what do the early years look like, which I'll talk you through now. So you can see on this slide, this is the outline of year 1 and year 2 of the programme. So year 1, we start with some of the basic preclinical science, some of the basic biomedical science, covering some cell systems, integrated systems, which we also combine some teaching sessions, which we call clinical problem sessions, which help you explore in a bit more detail some of the clinical aspects of scientific and academic medicine that you're studying. Throughout the programme, you'll see the sort of threaded elements that start in first year but run throughout the whole of the course. So those are on the right-hand side of the slide, shaded in blue. So you have ethics teaching, some teaching in evidence-based medicine, critical appraisal, thinking about development of scientific thinking, development of scientific skills. Also cover very early on communication skills, and that communication skills teaching programme continues throughout the 4 years of the programme. And then we also have a module which covers aspects of social sciences and psychology for medicine, which we call the behavioural sciences course. And also the public health programme sits alongside that. So it's a very varied programme, and that starts from very early on in the course. At the end of the first year, you'll have some examinations. What are those? The preliminary examinations in graduate entry medicine, so they come right at the end of year 1. We'll touch a little bit later on what those examinations look like. And having passed those successfully, we'll move into year 2 of the programme. And year 2 of the programme builds on some of the fundamental teaching, academic medicine and clinical science, but also expands to include more clinical placement time. So you'll see at the start of year 2, we carry on with some teaching in the neurosciences, so that happens early on in year 2 of the course. And then there's the laboratory medicine programme. So that programme is a programme where you first are integrated with some of the students on the standard course. So students are on year 4 of the standard entry programme, which is the 6-year course. And in the laboratory medicine programme, they'll be teaching around some of the laboratory disciplines in microbiology, pathology, and those sort of things. And that teaching is designed to prepare you for the clinical placements that come in the second half of year 2. So after Christmas in year 2, we'll move on to some placements in medicine, surgery. So those will both be in Oxford and out of Oxford in settings in the region, hospitals outside of the hospitals that are located in the Oxford area. So that's year 2. Thinking about a bit later down the line, so as you come towards the second half of the programme, so I mentioned earlier on some integration with the standard entry course. So by year 3, the graduate entry programme here in Oxford is fully integrated with the standard programme, and that will be year 5 students who will be integrated with by the time you're in year 3 with the graduate entry programme. And in that year, it's an opportunity to explore some more depth, some of the specialities that are important for the clinical practice of medicine. So you can see some of those listed, and I know Richard Harrington talked a bit more about some of those later on. So paediatrics, and reproductive health, just some of the specialities that you'll cover in that particular year. Again, you'll see there's some examinations at the end of year 3. And I should mention those exams are the first examinations form part of what is now known as the medical licensing assessment. So many of you will know that in order to now to graduate in medicine from a UK medical school, to sit and pass the medical licensing assessment, which is both the clinical examination and then also a written examination, so an applied knowledge test, which is a multiple choice question examination. So the first part of that, the first clinical component of that, comes at the end of year 3. That then takes you on to your final year. So that takes you on to year 4 of the programme, which is the final year. Final attachments happen during that year, with the exams in final year coming after Christmas. So they come in January and February. Those are, again, both clinical exams, also written exams. And then after those exams, assuming you pass them, there's then some opportunity to pursue interests that you decide upon. So there's an opportunity to go on an elective, say an opportunity to decide to study medicine elsewhere outside of Oxford. It can be in the UK, can be in Oxford, but many people use that as an opportunity to go abroad. And then it's also an opportunity to undertake some special study modules, some clinical options where you can identify some particular areas of medicine that you're interested in studying. So that's a broad outline of what the course looks like. As I say, if there's any questions that you have as we're going along, do feel free to post them in the Q&A box on the right-hand side of the page, and we'll try and pick those up as we go through. So we don't pick up as we go through, we'll come to at the end. What about Oxford itself and sort of what the teaching facilities look like? Well, you'll find that on the programme here in Oxford, you'll be taught in a whole variety of places. So quite a lot of your teaching will happen up at the John Radcliffe Hospital. So that's the main hospital here in Oxford, or one of the main hospitals here in Oxford. So you'll have some teaching at John Radcliffe Hospital first year, but also that will continue as you progress through the programme. And then also in first year in particular, you'll have some teaching at the Medical Sciences Teaching Centre. If you come to one of our in-person open days, those are usually held at the Medical Sciences Teaching Centre, which is the picture on the left, which you can see. Some of you may have visited it before. So that's right in the centre of Oxford, the Science Park area. It's backs onto the main university parks, which is where that picture is taken from. But as I say, if you were to come to Oxford, you can also expect to go to a number of different places for clinical placements. So that's both GP practices out in the community within Oxfordshire, but in surrounding counties, so Buckinghamshire, also Berkshire as well. And then also some nearby hospitals as well in the surrounding counties. So a whole variety of teaching locations, which you might find yourself at. A little sort of more about the course and some more detail as to how we teach and what the programme looks like. Well, I think it's important to say it's a full-time course and it's an in-person course. So the majority of the teaching is in-person teaching. So expect you to attend sessions, we expect you to attend seminars and lectures, teaching that is arranged. We do, where we can, now try and record sessions where that's possible. So where we can record sessions, but the primary purpose of the recording of those sessions is to allow you to consolidate on the teaching that has taken place and to allow you to review material and catch up on that teaching a bit later down the line. What else do we have? Well, alongside the teaching, alongside the sessions that the main department puts on for you, you'll also have college tutorials, and that's one of the main things about coming to Oxford is that as well as being a member of the university, you'll also be a member of a college. I'll talk a little bit more about the colleges a bit later on. But one of the roles of the colleges, there's lots of things that colleges offer students. One of the roles of the colleges is to offer teaching, and that teaching is designed to complement the teaching that the university offers you. So you have what's called college tutorials, and those happen right from the start of the programme. So right from the very start of year 1 to continue throughout the rest of the course. Some other things that I guess we think are special and unique about the course is that there's lots of opportunities to engage with what's going on in Oxford. That's both within the course and outside of the course. We're really lucky that Oxford is a world-leading research centre, internationally renowned for research studies in medical sciences and beyond. on the course, actually, one of the main things that we try and offer you is an opportunity to engage in that research, and that's both through the teaching that you're offered, but also that's through opportunities for you to engage in research projects and to work with academics and identify things that we might be interested in studying in more detail. And we try and help you do that during the time in the programme. We've talked a little bit about clinical placements, and I won't cover that again at this point, because I know that's something that Richard Harrington will pick up on later on. But the other thing that I think is really good about this course and what's on offer here is the support that the course offers you from the welfare and well-being perspective. It's one of the things that is really important, and we ensure that these are priority for students on programme. And there's lots of opportunities for wellbeing and welfare support, both from the medical school and from the department, but also from outside the medical school and the department through the colleges and beyond. So it's a very brief overview of the course and what it looks like. And I'm sure you'll hear a bit more later on from one of our current students who's going to talk to you just after 3 o'clock. And then one of our former students who will be joining us again after 3 o'clock. And that's an opportunity to hear a bit more from people who are familiar with the course from a student perspective as to what they think is good and important about this programme. So I did briefly touch on assessments and exams. Won't talk about assessments and exams in too much detail, but important to say a few words about it, because I think when you're choosing a graduate entry course to apply to it, it's helpful to know not just what the teaching looks like, but also what assessments look like. Examining, and we mentioned in years 3 and 4 of the programme, the medical licensing assessment. The assessments are a bit different earlier on in the programme. So in year 1 and year 2 of the programme, some of the assessment is obviously focused on the preclinical science and the biomedical science, and we largely assess that through written examinations. So those are both multiple choice questions, but also short answer question papers. So those papers are designed to examine your understanding of the scientific principles. But there are other assessments that sit alongside that. On the earlier slides, we talked about the breadth of the curriculum that you'll study while you're here. We talked about medical sciences, we talked about ethics, and we talked about public health. So some of those elements are assessed in slightly different ways. So year 1 of the programme is a submitted piece of work on the behavioural sciences module. Of writing what we call the commentary. And we mentioned in the previous slide about opportunities for you to engage with, develop special interests in academic and research areas. So one of the assessments focuses on that, and it's a submitted literature review in the first year, and then a project presentation in year 2 to examine what is known as the academic special interest. But as well, it's important that, again, from early on in the programme, we start looking at and helping you develop your clinical skills, your consultation skills. And so as you move through the programme, those will be assessed through what we call OSCEs. It's shorthand for objective structured clinical examinations, and I think that's something that Richard Harrington will talk a bit later on. The final component that it's important to mention, it's not just in year 1 and year 2, but obviously throughout the whole of the course, is what's really important is that we're helping you prepare to graduate, to be medically qualified, to work as doctors for most of you, that be able to be registered with the General Medical Council to work as a doctor in the UK. And so what's really important as well is us being assured that as well as being able to have the knowledge that's important to be a doctor, but you also have the appropriate professional and wider skills that are suitable and appropriate to practice medicine. So we'll assess that as you go through the programme, and that's largely through non-written submissions and non-examination settings, but through reflective practice and e-portfolio and sign-offs that you'll have clinical placement as you move through the course. So that's just a very brief overview of assessments. across the programme, as I say, do post any questions as we go through. If there's anything that is unclear or anything you want to know more detail about, do put that in the question and answer. And I know that often on these open days we have people joining us from all over UK, but not just all over UK, from outside the UK, and often people joining us internationally. So really a warm welcome wherever you're joining us from. So if there's things that are unfamiliar to you, do feel free to ask. If you're not familiar with the UK, if there's any acronyms that I've used that don't make sense, do feel free to post any questions in the chat, and we'll happily pick those up as we go through. So let's move on to tell you a bit more about the sort of nuts and bolts of applying to the course. So some of you will be thinking about applying to the course this year. So I've got some dates that are relevant for those who are thinking of applying this year. Some of you will be interested perhaps in applying next year or in future years, but I think things are not going to change significantly. So this information is hopefully relevant to you as well. So we mentioned earlier on that it was a relatively small programme. So we actually have about 45 places available on the programme. It varies a little bit each year, but that's the rough number of places that are available. So we normally make offers to a slightly larger number of applicants than the places we have available, just recognising that sometimes not everybody who's made an offer accepts that offer, and sometimes even if somebody accepts an offer for whatever reason, sometimes they're not always able to start. But that just gives you a sense of what the number of places looks like. And we mentioned earlier on the colleges, the role of the colleges in teaching medicine, and the role the colleges play in education at Oxford. So it's a collegiate university here in Oxford, so colleges are a very important part of the university. And so when you apply to the university, when you apply to the programme, you can apply to a college and select a college that your application will identify. So down the right-hand side, you'll see the list of colleges that accept applications for graduate entry medicine. And you'll see that's not the full list of colleges in Oxford. So not all of the colleges in Oxford offer entry for graduate entry medicine. It's a slightly smaller list that offer entry for graduate entry medicine. So that list, as I say, is down the right-hand side. There are a couple of those colleges which are graduate-only colleges. So Green Templeton College, Harris Manchester College are two of them, graduate-only colleges, with the colleges admitting undergraduates as well. When you're applying via UCAS, and I'll mention UCAS a bit later on, you don't necessarily have to identify a college. You can also make what's known as an open application. So you don't have to select a particular college when you apply. You can make an open application. That's important to know. When you do apply and when we do receive your application, for the purposes of the admissions process, we will then assign your application to a nominal college. So you will be assigned a college after application, but you won't have to choose one as you apply. If you want to know more about the colleges, do have a look at the college websites. There's often useful information on the college websites and information for prospective applicants. Some of them will have some videos on. And if you're in Oxford, many of the colleges are happy to welcome you as visitors to the college, so you can go and have a look around and see what some of the colleges are like. They're all different in nature and character and size and shape, so do have a look if you're not familiar with the colleges. So what do you have to apply? What's academic requirements? And this is really important. So there's a requirement that hopefully most people on this call will know of, that you must have a first degree in applied or experimental science. So that's quite a broad-ranging definition. But at the moment, the course doesn't take applicants from non-science graduates, so that's important to be aware of. So please don't apply if you don't have a science degree, applied or experimental science degree. I'll try and pick up a couple of queries that were sent in before this open afternoon around eligibility, what's eligible and what's not eligible. Do always check our website. There's quite a useful list of what are considered eligible degrees. It's not an exhaustive list. So if your degree isn't on there and you think it might be a suitable degree, do always get in touch, to email us if you're eligible to apply or not. There is a requirement to have some sciences at A level or the equivalent school leaving qualifications. So we ask for you to have 2 sciences at A level, of which one of those must be chemistry. It doesn't matter what the other subjects are. If you are less than 5 years from taking your A levels, there is a minimum grade requirement. So you do need to have at least an A and E B if you've taken your A levels within the last 5 years. If you're beyond that 5-year mark, that minimum grade requirement doesn't apply. So just picking up some of the questions that we had posted in advance. Query about whether it's acceptable to apply with predicted grades. Yep, so absolutely. You can apply with predicted grades. So many of our applicants are in their final year of undergraduate study, and you're very welcome to apply with a predicted classification. As I said already, if you sat your A levels more than 5 years ago, there's no grade requirement. So if you sat your A levels beyond that 5-year window, there's no grade requirement. There is the subject requirement, but no grade requirement. A couple of queries about degrees that are acceptable. So psychology, yes, very much an acceptable degree. Dentistry, again, very much an acceptable degree. So we have lots of applicants each year, dentistry backgrounds. If you're an international applicant, how do you demonstrate the requirements? So there's quite useful information on the university website about equivalents to A levels. So do check there, and we will accept grade equivalents to A levels, recognizing that not everybody will have A levels. So I hope that helps me pick up on some of the queries. Let's move on and talk a little bit about our selection criteria. So when we're looking at your applications, these are our 3 main selection criteria we look at, deciding whether to offer you an interview, and then later on deciding whether to offer you a place on the programme. So those are the 3 headings. So academic ability, commitment to medicine, and then personal suitability for medicine. So there's different ways that you can demonstrate those criteria, and I'll talk a little bit more about what we ask for in the application, and then we can pick up on how you might demonstrate how you meet those selection criteria. So what do we look for, and how do we assess it? Well, you will need to apply through the UCAS system. Hopefully most people will be familiar with the UCAS system. So UCAS has a deadline for this year for medicine of the 15th of October 2025. So if you are applying, that's the absolute deadline to get your UCAS forms in. Can't accept late applications. So if you do want to be considered for admission this year, please make sure to get your application in before then. Do try and get it in as soon as possible. There's always technical difficulties that we hear of that some people have had, or issues with UCAS website. So don't leave it to the last minute if you're applying. Do log on early, get your application in. Do note though, there is another form that we ask you to complete. So that's known as our Oxford application form. So that's a slightly separate form that we ask of in addition to the UCAS form. And that's an opportunity to really detail some specific reasons of, number 1, why you're applying to the programme at Oxford, but number 2, how you think you meet Oxford specific selection criteria. So we recognise that the UCAS form will be a statement that you write for every university that you're applying to study medicine, and therefore the Oxford application form is an additional form for you to really demonstrate why you're applying, and why we should consider you can meet the selection criteria. So do use it as an opportunity to really make a case. Please don't just copy and paste what you put on your UCAS form. You read your UCAS form in conjunction with your application form. As part of that Oxford application form, we ask you to identify 2 references, and that's 2 references in addition to the reference that you put on the UCAS form. So in the UCAS form, you'll have to have a reference, and then we ask you for 2 extra references for the Oxford application form. And we ask that at least one of those is an academic reference where possible. So supervisor from university degree programme, supervisor from graduate programme. Please try and identify somebody that can be a reference. You can provide evidence of your suitability. Do let your references know that you're applying. Ask them in advance. Make sure you ask them whether they're happy to be nominated as a reference. And do please, if possible, ask them to review the selection criteria, because the better the reference is tailored towards our selection criteria, the easier it is for us to see how you meet the selection criteria. So it's really helpful if your references have read the criteria, you can comment on that specifically. The final thing is the UCAT, and the next couple of slides I'll touch on the UCAT, so the admissions test that we ask you to sit. So everybody does need to sit the UCAT form if you're applying to the programme. I should briefly mention there's a comment on there around extenuating circumstances. So we do recognise that from time to time there have been difficulties with academic work where you feel grades are not representative of what your true performance is, whether that's at A level, whether that's in your degree. If you feel that that's the case, and you have the evidence to support it, then you're welcome to submit an extenuating circumstances form, and we review all of those individually as we shortlist the application forms. So we look at those and take those into account and factor those in to our decision making, and hopefully try and do that as fairly as we can. So what about the UCAT? So I did mention that everyone must sit the UCAT, and the UCAT test is used as part of the shortlisting. It helps us make decisions about who to invite for interview and who not to invite for interview. There's not, I should say, a hard and fast cut-off score. So it's often a question we get asked: what's your cut-off score for UCAT? There's no. I think I've got a slide on it a bit later on, actually. So there's no absolute set score for UCAT to obtain an interview. Some medical schools do have an absolute cut-off. There is some data from last year that show you, so the average UCAT score for people that we offered interviews to was 2,976. So that's the average score of the applicants that were shortlisted for interview. And you can also then see the range there. So the minimum score of an applicant that was shortlisted for interview is 2,400, with the maximum score being 3,560. So hopefully that's useful information to factor into your decision making, but no absolute cut-off score. So a reminder of the dates. You haven't got much time left if you're planning on applying this year and you haven't yet registered and booked a UCAT test. You can see that the booking deadline is 10 days away. So you have to be booked to sit UCAT by the 19th of September if you want to sit it this year. And the last day of sitting it is the 26th of September. So that's the very last test day. So if you haven't done that yet and you're thinking of applying, please do get on and do that. I know some of you will have already sat your UCAT assessment, and some of you may have a score already from that. If you booked early, if you booked prior to the opening date, which was the middle of June, if you've sat the test already, you'll your UCAT score already, so this won't be relevant for you. If you haven't, UCAT preparation plan on the UCAT website can be quite helpful in preparing for UCAT. Might be a bit too late to look at that if you're sitting the UCAT this year, but if you're attending this open afternoon thinking about applying in future years, do have a look at the UCAT preparation plans. some top tips and lots of sample papers online. So do review that and see how that might help you prepare. That's something that you'll doing in future years. So just take a bit of a time check where we're up to. It's just coming up to 2:45. Richard, how are you doing for time?
I'm fine. Yeah, I'm ready when you are, David.
Great. Well, I'll just finish off a few more slides and then perhaps we can move on to your slides if that's okay.
Sure.
So, talked about UCAT scores. That's just another slide, as you might expect, a sort of fairly distribution of UCAT scores of shortlisted applicants. Just a really graphical demonstration of what I was just saying. So we touched on the Oxford application form. Question will be why do you want to study this course? Why this course and why are you suitable? So just some top tips really, what to say, what to cover. So important to describe your sort of personal suitability. So why you think you're suitable for this course in particular. Things we're particularly interested in is your interest in medicine. Also your interest in sort of academic basis of medicine and the particular style of teaching on this course. Things that are important to see. In your UCAS form, you'll cover lots of other things around the selection criteria. You'll study medicine for your grades and degrees and or the academic work that you've done so far will demonstrate your academic ability. And people often ask about work experience. What is sort of work experience necessary? Is it important? What sort of work experience do I have to have? Really good question. We might sort of touch on that a bit later on. When we hear from some current and former students, it used to be that there's high expectation for very traditional work experience. We don't necessarily look for that. What we really want to see is that you have a really good understanding of what being a doctor will be like, that you've satisfied yourself with something you want to do, something you want to study. You've got experience of interacting with people, communicating with people. That can be demonstrated really through a whole variety of ways. So it can be through a formal work experience. That's fine if you've been able to get that. But if you haven't, and everybody can manage to do that, then the volunteering experiences are really absolutely okay. Very good to talk about. So it could be time spent volunteering with community groups or other organisations, or volunteering social care in hospitals with children's activities. All of those things can really help inform your decision to study medicine and demonstrate a lot of what we're looking for. So if you are shortlisted for interview, just to tell you a bit more about the process, what to expect, do let you know early December-ish if you've been shortlisted. So usually sort of first week of December or so, we want to let you know. And we normally fight around 2.5 applicants per place to interview. If you are invited to interview, then at the moment interviews are online, so you're saying to come to Oxford, and you'll usually be interviewed at 2 colleges. So you'll have one college that you're assigned to for one day of interviews, second college you're assigned to for a second day of interviews. So one of those colleges will be the college that you identified as your first choice college when you applied through the UCAS system, or if you made an open application, it will be the college that we assigned you to. And then the second college will be the college that we allocate you to for the purposes of the second interview. It's important to say that the colleges don't have any knowledge of where you've applied to interview you, so you have to take some bias out of the interview system. And the interviews by the colleges are a variety of different formats. There's no one standard format of what a college interview looks like. Some will have a single interview, some will have 2 slightly shorter interviews. It varies a little bit across the colleges. But I do now have a brief video just demonstrating the interview style for you, which may be helpful for some of you to watch. So what I will do, try and see if I can get this video to play. perhaps James, you could just give me the thumbs up to let me know you can hear the sound and see the video when it comes on. Okay.
Hi there, Annie. Thank you for joining us today. What we're going to do today is we're going to run through some questions with you, and then you'll have a bit of a chance to ask questions at the end, if that's okay. But if I could start off just by introducing myself. My name is Mahesh Ramasamy, and I'm a consultant physician.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, Annie. I'm Richard Harrington, a GP and Associate Director of Graduate Entry Medicine.
Nice to meet you both.
And you?
Okay, so Annie, on your personal statement, you've talked about some of the experience you've had shadowing doctors before coming to this interview. I'd like you just to think about one of the interesting patients that you met in one of those placements, perhaps, and just tell us why you found them interesting and what was special about them.
I guess a sort of patient that stands out for me is in my undergrad over one of the summers, I spent several months in the BC Cancer Centre doing some research on prostate cancer. And I think the first actually patient that I saw with that, he really sticks in my mind, just because the procedure that they were doing on him for the radiotherapy for his prostate cancer, the actual procedure that they were doing was influenced by the work that we'd done. So actually seeing a real life human being who was able to interact and had these sort of emotions and fears, as opposed to just seeing these images of ultrasounds of MRIs or prostates, and to see how this work had gone from being sort of very theoretical, looking at the numbers, to suddenly being very human and very real. And I found that really special and really motivating as well, because it made everything seem so worthwhile and so very human.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Annie. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to show you some slides of a patient. Okay, can I just confirm that you can see that slide okay?
I can, yes.
So these are two graphs of an HIV viral load versus CD4 count in in two patients with HIV. So don't worry if you don't know too much about HIV. For the purposes of this question, what you need to know is that HIV is a virus which infects a population of immune cells called CD4 cells, which are a kind of T cell. So what I'd like you to do is just focus on patient 2 and tell me what's going on there.
So the first thing that I notice is that the scale on the y-axis is different. So for the CD4 count, so they're all lower counts for this patient. So at no time do they have the sort of higher levels that the first patient does. So over the same period of those same 5 years, they have a viral load which goes up and down, but largely remains fairly high. Their CD4 count does sort of increase over the first year or two, but then fluctuates and never sort of goes up hugely the way it does in the first patient.
Okay, and what might be different about this patient, do you think?
I mean, so they started at a sort of similar level in both sort of viral load and CD4 count. So this could be a sort of medication compliance issue, or whether or not they are medicated, I'm not sure. Although in that case, I might expect more of a just continuing downward trend in CD4 cells. Perhaps they're not responding to the medication that they're on as well, or that they have sort of fluctuations in the way that they're taking it, or perhaps they're trialed on different treatments that are more or less effective.
Let's pick those apart. So you said there might be a problem with their medication becoming less effective. Why might that be?
It could, if it was effective initially and then became less so, I'm not sure, but perhaps it's possible for sort of resistance to develop. That's purely speculation on my part, but just thinking about, antibiotics and the way that, if they're used over a continuing period of time, that resistance can develop and they become less effective. I'm not sure if something like that is possible in this case.
Absolutely, we do see that with HIV. So it could be that the virus is changing in some way to become resistant to the drugs. But you also said that there was a problem, could be a problem with compliance. Why might somebody not take their drugs?
They could purely be forgetting to. They could be living, quite a chaotic, stressful lifestyle where having to take medications perhaps several times a day just is very difficult for them. They could not like the side effect burden that comes with taking a lot of these drugs, and I've heard that for HIV medications that can be quite a lot of side effects. So perhaps they just simply really don't like the effect of that. They could perhaps not understand the significance of having to take their medication all the time. And also perhaps as they're getting more ill, they might have sort of other priorities, or if they're, as a result of sort of side effects of HIV, that they're becoming slightly cognitively impaired, that might then mean that they're forgetting their medication or not thinking it's as important.
Okay. And anything specific about HIV that might mean that people are less compliant?
I think the stigma really, because historically there is so much sort of shame associated with this disease. It's thought, the common, I think, public perception is you're only going to get it if you're engaging in very risky sexual practices, or if you're sort of a drug addict and sharing needles, whereas that's obviously not the case. And many people from all walks of life can get HIV for a variety of different reasons. So people may not want even their closest family and friends to know about their diagnosis. So they may not sort of want to take their medication around people, or to even have it in the house, for example.
Okay. How might you talked about people with chaotic lifestyles who might forget to take their medications. What practically could you do to make that easier?
I think a huge variety of things, but definitely having someone, perhaps a specifically trained, nurse whose job it is to touch base with these individuals and to make sure that they have the support they need to be getting their treatments, that they have the means to pick up their prescriptions, they have sort of transport to a pharmacy, transport to appointments, and anything from that to sort of things like reminders and text messages, things like that, which could provide prompts to either take medications or attend appointments and screening.
Okay, thank you very much, Annie. I'm going to hand you over to Richard now.
This is about.
Okay, so we'll probably cut away from that mock interview there. Hopefully that was some insight into what interview for medicine might look like. A fairly typical interview. And what might you expect? Well, typical sort of warm-up questions, perhaps some questions on some scientific or medical interest, understand how you think, approach questions, and understand a bit more about you. But that's just a very brief overview of what interviews might look like. So Richard Harrington, I think you just wanted to briefly comment.
Welcome. Yeah, I just thought I'd chip in to say, not to frighten people off, that was a really good interview from Annie there, and she was in her final year when she was answering that. So please don't be put off by the excellent quality of her responses. But you'll see it's a mixture of really simple stuff. She started off with an observation about the units on the y-axis, through to something a whole lot more thoughtful and integrative as to why someone might not want to take someone might not be taking their HIV medication. So it's a real spectrum from basic, simple, probably kind of GCSE, O-level type maths, physics, science, through to the nature of the human condition. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard. Really helpful advice. And I should say at this point, James McBain, who's working behind the scenes to keep this meeting working, has let me know that actually our Q&A function is not working properly at the moment. So Apologies to those of you who have put some questions in the Q&A box. I haven't been able to see them. James has found a route in to get the questions, so we'll try and get to your questions as soon as we can later on this afternoon. But apologies, I haven't been able to pick up any questions yet. But James has now found a way to get the questions and will share them with me in due course. What I would suggest now, though, is it's just coming up to 3 o'clock. I've been talking for about an hour or so, so I'm sure that everybody needs a break for a little bit. So I'd suggest we have a pause now for 5 minutes or so. Just go and stretch their legs, get a refreshment, then join us back here at about 3:05, and we'll carry on with the rest of the afternoon. So we'll see you again in about 5 minutes or so. Bye-bye for now. Okay, so welcome back. We'll get started on the second half of this open afternoon. Thanks for staying with us. I hope everybody managed to get themselves a refreshment. Richard, did you get yourself a refreshment during the break?
I did. I had a good drink of water. Thank you, David.
Excellent. So I know you've got some slides next. Before we get on to those slides, we can pick up on a few questions perhaps that came in the first half. And in fact, before we do that, perhaps I should introduce Thomas Pither, who has joined us. Dr. Pither. Tom, can you hear us okay? Great.
Yeah,
So
all good, thanks.
welcome, Tom. Tom is one of our former graduate entry students, now a Foundation Year 2 doctor in London and on the academic foundation programme, or specialist foundation programme. Tom, do you want to just briefly introduce yourself in a bit more detail and tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So my original plan after school was to go into sort of research. So I did an undergrad in biosciences and a PhD after that, and then came to the realization quite early on during that degree that it wasn't quite the sort of path for me, and then actually took a bit more of a slight turn into medicine on the basis that the people I was working with, a lot of them were doctors and clinicians taking time out of training to do some studying where I was before, and obviously did some reading about the graduate entry program at Oxford, applied there, and yeah, had a very, very enjoyable 4 years there. And then now, as Dr. McCartney mentioned, I'm in doing my academic block as part of my F2 in London. So happy to take any questions about the course, foundation training in general, or the kind of academic pathway as well. But yeah, thank you.
Fantastic, Tom. Let's pick up a few questions we had from the first half. So I'll be able to ask you some of these, Tom, if that's all right. So first question, and it's probably actually a more technical question. So would 2 academic referees be more preferred, or could I have 1 reference from one of the healthcare professionals at the hospital I volunteer at? Richard Harrington, you read lots of applications. Any comments on whether 2 additional academic references are preferred, or whether it's acceptable to have a healthcare professional in addition to that?
It is acceptable to have a healthcare professional reference. I think you, with respect to colleagues, you need to sort of choose someone quite carefully, someone who has known you quite well, worked with you for a fairly long time, has some experience, and can speak with some authority. So rather than, for example, someone who is a newly qualified healthcare professional, and I think you want to have a really solid academic reference to back that up.
It's really helpful. Thank you, Richard. So Tom, this might be a helpful one for you to pick up on from your experience as a student. So there's a question here: to what extent does the college you attend affect your experience of studying graduate entry medicine? I know it was a couple of years ago for you since being on course, but any sort of memories of that?
Yeah, I think obviously only speaking with experience from the one college I went to, which was Pembroke. I think so from the interviews, you could tell that each college put a slightly different emphasis on aspects of your training. So Pembroke, for example, I remember thinking they were asking me a lot of problem solving based questions and getting at that side a lot, as well as the human element as well. That was also there. And then I also interviewed at Green Templeton, who again I think they place much more emphasis on that interaction, patient factors side of things. And from what I understand from talking to, from obviously going through the course, a lot of people's, all of my friends at other colleges, they obviously you cover the same core material. So, the colleges are given instructions, you have to cover, X, Y, Z throughout the year to supplement our lectures and other teaching. So that doesn't change. But obviously the personal flavours and interests of each of the colleges, tutors and doctors working there will probably influence and sort of reflect your own teaching slightly. I think all I can say is, that was my experience from the interviews, and I guess that would probably be reflected in what they're looking for, in individuals. But you will cover the same things, but yeah, as I say, there is a slightly different probably emphasis on certain elements of the training.
It's really helpful, Tom. And as you said, all the sort of core essential teaching is covered by the Central Medical School, and the colleges really add to that through the college tutorials, which are all a bit different and individual. And sometimes, as you say, some of the focus of that depends on what the interests of the tutors are at the particular college you go to. There was another question actually for you, Tom, that's come in. Why did you decide on Oxford over any other graduate entry program or graduate entry medical school?
Sure. So I think whilst I decided that a sort of pure research career wasn't for me, I still wanted and do want an element of that in my future career going forward. And Oxford is very well known as having a strong research and academic background. And actually throughout the course here, there are ample opportunities to get involved in studies and bits of research here and there. I did some surgical themed stuff because that's the sort of hopefully the pathway I'm going to go down. I think those opportunities are available at other universities, but I think at Oxford, they're easier to seek out and more widely available. And I think the other thing is if you go on the course website, they very much states that you have to be disciplined with your time and manage, and it's a lot of self-directed learning because the lectures and the teaching won't cover everything. It's not possible because the curriculum is so vast. And I prefer doing things myself. I prefer to sort of manage my own time and very much direct my learning where I feel it's most valuable. So I'd say, and it goes without saying as well, that the reputation of the university is extremely high and extremely good. So of those are probably the key reasons that I sort of employed when choosing Oxford. Yeah.
Thanks, Tom. Richard.
Yeah, Tom, in that context, would you like to say a little bit about the academic special interest program and how that's followed you through?
Sure. So in the second year, you're given the opportunity to undertake a bit of research in a certain area, and that can take many forms. So in my case, as I've said already, I'm interested in going down the surgical route. So I made contact with some members of the cardiothoracic team based at the John Radcliffe Hospital, which is the main teaching hospital within Oxford, and I got involved in a surgical audit of certain trauma patients coming into the emergency department over a few years. But then other people did lab projects, other people did kind of systematic reviews and things. So not only can you very much choose the area that you're interested in, you can also very much tailor that project into your own individual interests and own individual strengths as well. And actually that collaboration then formed the basis for me, taking that work forward, presenting it at a conference in Oxford later on in my third year. So, I think it works really well as a sort of stepping stone into, future opportunities and routes that you can take that work into, as well as just being the assignment and the requirement for that second year.
Okay, thank you.
One more, perhaps, Tom, if that's okay, before we move on to hear a few slides from Richard. So there's a question around, did you feel supported in Oxford with your transition from PhD to medicine? Any changes that felt difficult?
Sure, absolutely. So one thing I would say is, obviously, I came from a PhD background, which is a lot of information, a very sport specific area, and medicine is sort of the opposite. So it's information in, you know, a much wider, broader spectrum. And so it's not always the most straightforward transition, but you are very well supported, I would say that, from the off. So from a university-wide standpoint, you've got support networks there. Your college provides you know, places to go to turn to if you need support, that from that perspective, and also the medical school as well. So I would say, you know, there were several different avenues, routes you could go down. And on the whole, I found the, you know, the support at the university extremely good throughout my time. I've never had any worries, concerns that I wasn't really genuinely well looked after. And I think that's also reflected in the fact that you are constantly asked for feedback throughout as you go through the course. You know, there's a big emphasis placed on how we view the material and how it's being delivered, and, you know, acting on that. So not just leaving things as they are because they've always been that way. Actually, I did feel that the course made an active effort to constantly update and change and tweak things according to what the students were telling them in response. So I would say, yeah, I would have no hesitation in saying I was very well supported. Yeah.
Thanks, Tom. We better leave it there for now, but if I may, we'll come back to you a bit later on, if you're okay to stay with us for a few more minutes. So with that, we're running slightly behind time. Just a reminder, a bit later on, 5-10 minutes or so, we'll hear from one of our current students. So Ruth is joining us to tell us about sort of current student perspective. But before then, it's really over to you, Richard.
Okay, thanks, David. I will speed up a bit, and thank you for looking after my slides for me. So let's crack on, please. Okay, yes, so a little bit about the clinical course. So we put, as other medical schools do, great emphasis on early clinical contact, and that runs through, in the first year, runs through most Wednesdays. Vast majority of Wednesdays are spent out in placement, and students alternate between a GP practice and district general hospital, and David mentioned earlier where some of those are. That means that you get a diverse range of experiences for yourself individually, but also compared to your colleagues, and that is the start of a sort of blended career, if you like, in terms of medical education. People don't get the same experiences, a little bit like the college question, and actually it's really about how the individual makes the most of the experiences that are offered to them, whether it's at a college, DGH, District General Hospital, or a GP practice in sort of leafy Oxfordshire town, or in more of an inner city practice in Oxford. Okay, next, please. What you do is to, during your clinical Wednesdays, is you'll learn more about the human condition, which I've mentioned already, not just from the perspective of patients, that's very important, but also from the perspective of hospital doctors, your tutors, and also your GP tutors and your primary healthcare team. That sort of wraps around the GP practices. And when I say your tutor, your hospital tutor, that is because you go to the same DGH and the same GP practice throughout your first year, and you learn about the NHS too. We taxi you out if the venue is not easily accessible by public transport. Otherwise, you make your own way. Thank you. Next, please. So yes, I think we've sort of covered that, to be honest. Let's carry on. Thank you. So yes, what do we cover? Well, in the first year, basic clinical skills. So that is talking with patients, examining patients, some basic practical tasks, taking blood, and whenever possible, we link the curriculum that's being delivered in Oxford to the clinical placements that you're taking. So in the first term in Oxford, you'll be studying things like hematology, infectious diseases, metabolism, and at the same time you'll be exploring and learning how to talk to people, talk to patients, in following a medical model, so that you can distill their history, their information, develop a diagnostic method, and be able to summarize and communicate your thoughts to colleagues. And in the second term, we teach you learn how to examine patients. And so that follows a sort of fairly predictable system. You start, for example, the second term with learning how to examine the heart, whilst you're learning cardiology and the physiology of the heart and circulation in Oxford. And that carries on through respiratory, gastrointestinal, and so on. Okay, thank you. Next, please. So integral to this experience is relationship you'll form with one patient in particular in primary care that we call the longitudinal patient. You'll meet them on your first day in general practice. General practice, primary care are terms that are used interchangeably, by me at least. And you'll have several meetings with that person and hopefully develop something of a relationship with them. And then at the as part of your assessments in the early summer, you write a case report for the GP relating to that patient that's anonymized. And in addition, you write a 3,000-word behavioral sciences long case commentary, which is related to some aspect of the behavioral sciences curriculum. So it might be looking at the doctor-patient relationship, or it might be looking at a way a patient perceives their care. And it's very much looking beyond the biomedical model, we hope, towards more of a biopsychosocial model. So something that is more holistic and embracing complexity in medicine. Thanks. Next one. Covered that. Next, please. Oh yes, this is what a patient of mine, a retired teacher, said, and I jotted it down while she was speaking. She said, "It was what was it like being the subject of a case study by a first-year grad entry student?" And she said it's therapeutic, actually, going through things from the beginning to the end. So many strange things have happened. Good to have the opportunity to think things through, and therapeutic to give voice to it. And I think that is that really demonstrates the relationship at its best. A lot of students worry they're kind of imposing themselves on patients, in whether it's in hospital or in GP practices, but actually it's a two-way street. And if you sort of give of yourself and take a real interest in people, as this lady says, therapeutic. Actually, what I didn't know when I was talking to her, she had a form of bone cancer. Neither of us knew, was that although her treatment seemed to have been fairly successful, about 6 weeks after this conversation that I noted down, she had a large blood clot on her lungs and died suddenly, which was, unexpected and shocking, but these things do happen. And the student had to sort of see this through. And what he did actually was to follow up by visiting her husband on several occasions, who was actually generally more old and frail than the primary patient. And subsequently, when I was talking to the husband, he spontaneously expressed how helpful and nice it had been for the student to come around and have a cup of tea and talk to him about how he was getting on and things. So the unpredictable does happen. Okay, next, please. Yes, what do students think? Well, of course, I've cherry-picked some of the feedback, but we hear it quite often. Best part of the course. And what does best mean? Well, it means it's the bit that's most immediately accessible, that's most obviously enjoyable, in some ways the least hard work, and in some ways that perhaps the least demanding. So it isn't, there's lots of great aspects about the course, but it does help students get through. Reminds me why I'm doing the course. Next, please. Yes, so perhaps for people who are having difficulty with coping with the academic work, they see it as a bit of a life raft, a sort of lifesaver, gives them a bit of buoyancy. Thanks. Next, please. And then David mentioned what an OSCE is, and we prepare you by giving a mock OSCE, where we will find real patients with physical signs, as it's viewed to practice, heart murmurs or problems with their lungs or an enlarged liver, say, and it really gives people an opportunity to measure their the way in which they've managed to acquire clinical skills over the course of what is actually quite a short length of time. And then there's a formative OSCE. That's the formative OSCE. Then there's a pass-fail OSCE. But in recent years, standards has always been so high in the OSCE that we've moved to the basis of the summative test is that you have to turn up and complete the OSCE. So there isn't like a pass-fail mark. And some of the feedback from the examiners who also examine for finals say is, wow, some of these students are wonderful. They really could, in certain areas, cope with finals. Next, please. And then I'll just touch on some of the subsequent years. David has sort of said this, although you're at Oxford Medical School, your clinical teaching is delivered in the Thames Valley across a number of different hospitals, and you should expect to travel away, spend significant chunks of your time out of Oxford, and we need to be very clear about that. There are really exceptional circumstances where people might have the majority of their placements in Oxford. That might be relating to a really significant illness on their own part, or caring responsibilities, perhaps as a primary carer or as a parent. But in general terms, you'll rotate around different hospitals, and you will hone your skills. Yeah, thanks. Keep going, David. Just speed me up by pressing me on. And then finally, the last 2 years, as David said, is wholly integrated with the standard course. There are some various specialties, and you get some student-selected themes. Okay, next, please. So in the third year, which is year 5 of the standard course, those are the 6 broad areas that you will study in various blocks that you rotate around. Autem is orthopedics, rheumatology, trauma and emergency medicine. Community-based medicine comprises general practice, primary care, alongside dermatology, some gerontology, and palliative care. But I think this is reasonably typical of other medical schools. Thanks. Next, please. And then there are OSCEs, and after your first year OSCE, the OSCEs you do in GE 2, 3 and 4 are exactly the same as for the standard course. And David referred to the medical licensing assessment, part of the clinical and professional skills assessment, an applied knowledge test. But this is a long way off for you guys. I'm sure you'll be fine when you get there. Thanks. Next, please. Yes, so finally, the final exam is across January and February, which is another OSCE and an applied knowledge test, AKT, linked to the MLA. And I would just say, if you do the maths, it is really sort of 3 years and 4 months into your course that you're sitting Oxford finals, and how do grad entry course students do compared to the ultra keen 19, 18-year-olds who rock up? Well, they can compete on equal terms, actually. There are various prizes awarded for high achieving students, and last year one of the grad entry students was awarded the sort of double prize for being the top student in finals. And in addition, the student with the best marks across the entire clinical course. So a really impressive woman, also from Pembroke, who's now off training to be, doing foundation posts prior to training as a surgeon too. Okay, next, please. Yes, so those are the final year 4 rotations. More medicine and surgery out of Oxford, an elective, and a preparation for practice course. And I can see that Anna has arrived. Anna Ruth, final year student. Thank you very much. Let's just press on, David. Thanks. So there we go. The OSCE on the left is old school OSCE in what's called sub-FUSC. You'll have to wear that for some of your academic exams. White bow tie for men, black bow tie for women, but more relevant, that is now a sort of historic interest. People now take their clinical exams in scrubs or clinical clothing, and there is someone on the right just really honing their skills so that when they start working on the wards, they are much better with their clinical skills, cannulation, venipuncture, and a whole lot of other things than I was when I qualified 40 years ago. Right, next, please. So there is, Tom talked about the academic special interest project, and there is scope for people to develop their, not a bespoke course, but to have an element of flexibility. And also important to say, we had the 25-year reunion about 6 weeks ago in Oxford. So the course has been running for 25 years, and amazing actually seeing people together. And it underlines the point that you have a lot of fun across the years, but in particular within your year group. As David said, it's a small group, and people generally are really supportive of each other. Some strong relationships are formed. Indeed, some enduring relationships are formed. And there were a number of children present at the barbecue in the afternoon for the 25-year celebration. Have I almost finished, David? I hope so. Yes. Okay. There's some pictures of the course. So yes, we've moved over there is just take a step back, really think is medicine right for you. We get the occasional student who embarks on the course and then for whatever reason realizes that medicine was not right for them. We know that happens, but it's if that happens, we look upon it with a bit of sadness because it's a misstep for that person, and it's a place not offered to someone else. So think about it carefully. Of course, you'll do that. Should we just finish off, David? Oh yeah, this is demonstrating that point. Former student, thank you. Next, please. Actually, someone who left the grad entry course and went off and is a primary school teacher and having a fantastic time. Okay, next, please. Yes, just to remind you what David said, it's an accelerated course, not really condensed or boiled down. You cover a lot of ground, and in terms of the medical licensing assessment, and in addition, you are expected to do some research projects under the umbrella of the academic special interest project. So there's lots going on, and you need to be up for that. Well organised. Tom mentioned time management, and that's just worth factoring in when you apply. And you really need to have a good look at yourself, a sort of frank conversation, and make sure that you really are prepared to work extremely hard, particularly in your first year, depending, of course, on what your prior learning is. Some people have got sort of ideal backgrounds to sort of, I wouldn't say stroll in, but to come in to join the course, whereas others, say perhaps someone with a degree in psychology, have to work really hard to get up to pace in the first year. How are we doing? Is there another one? Oh yeah,
that's it.
That's it. The party. Woo!
More photos from our 25-year celebration.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Richard.
Right. Okay.
I think that's it. That is, that's it for now. And Anna, as you said, is waiting in the wings. Hi, Anna, and we'll put you on screen.
Hi.
Welcome. It's great to see you. Thank you very much, Anna. Anna stepped in
okay.
at the last minute to cover this for us. So Anna, welcome and thank you very much. I think you've got some slides to share.
Slides, yes.
Yeah, great. So
Hopefully
feel
they
free
should
to
show up.
share. And just a reminder for those people at home. So Anna's one of our current GU students, so we'll give us a sort of perspective course. And then after that, we'll just open up for some questions. Tom's still with us. Tom is in the background and happy to answer some more questions from sort of former course perspective, a graduate of the course perspective, and I think hopefully Anna can stay around for a few questions. So we have now found a way to get your questions off the Q&A posts. So do keep some questions coming in.
Perfect. Can you guys see my slides?
Let me put them on. There we go.
Perfect. Okay. I can't see you guys, so hopefully it should work, but I can see my slides, so that should be good. So yeah, very thank you to Steph, who helped me adapt, who gave me these slides, and then I was able to adapt them to sort of fit with my experience a little bit more. But yes, as David said, I'm one of the final year students, and I've just had a really good time so far. So hopefully you guys have heard a lot about the course already. And some of this might be old news, but I'm just going to recap things. So in general, like our course sort of makeup is about 30 to 40 students from a variety of different backgrounds. At least in my year, and I know the distribution is slightly different in each year, we had about a third of people who either came straight from a first degree or took a year out and did some work. We had about a third of people who had done some sort of masters, and then a third who'd come from a PhD or had a previous career, that sort of thing. And there really is a variety of things people have done beforehand. And that meant we ended up being, I think, a very sort of curious, diverse, and really social group, which was really nice. And I think one thing that I felt was a real bonus about this course is that it really considers your background in a holistic way, especially when you're applying. So I think just the fact that we have so many people from different backgrounds really just sort of makes the course better. And they've talked a bit about it being a small cohort. And I just wanted to reiterate that I think this is a real benefit. So we did get to know everyone really well, especially in first year, because you have these lectures, well, not 9 to 5 every day, but you do have a chunk of lectures every week. And because it's the same sort of 30-ish people, you really do get to know people. And we ended up having sort of socials outside of the course. There was different ways, where we would mingle with the different gems, so the ones in the years above us, and they were really supportive throughout our first year, which I think is really nice. And it just means that I think it feels social. I think some people may be used to sort of changing courses, but embarking on another 4-year course can feel like a big deal. And having such a tight-knit cohort at the start is really helpful. I think having smaller groups also means that you get really good tutorials. And another bonus is that your lecturers and the course directors do get to know you as well. And I think that can be really helpful because, everyone has different things going on in their life. And if there are reasons that you might need different extra support, or you might want to have, additional questions about careers and things like that, then they do know you and they can give you more personalized advice. In terms of the course and how it's laid out and what we do, I think you've already heard quite an overview. So I won't bother reiterating all of this, but I think the main thing is knowing that as you go through the years, you gradually get more clinical experience, but it's great that the clinical experience is embedded right from the start. I think another important thing is that throughout the course, you have different opportunities to explore your interests. And I think that's really lovely. I think the course takes into mind that you are, like an adult with interests. You've already probably got, experience in a variety of different fields, or, in different research areas, or just different academic interests. And giving you specific protected time to explore that is really lovely. I think another bonus is the fact that halfway through the second year, you combine with the undergraduate course. I found that really refreshing. We kind of do that, I think, in, basically after we finish a lecture block in second year, and we start having teaching with them. And I think just having, after you've been with the same 30 people for a year and a half, as lovely as it is, it's nice to have some fresh faces and also hear about their uni experience as well. And then third year, I think, has been the one that I've just finished, has been wonderful. You rotate through different specialties. You get such a broad coverage of knowledge, and it's really refreshing and it's really lovely, and it gives you time to think about what you're interested in as well. And then I've just started final year, so obviously I can't talk too much about that, but we've got preparation for practice, we've got electives to look forward to, and obviously we've got finals. But hopefully, and it seems like it, we're going to be very well prepared for that, and it looks like we've got sort of revision things built in. And I think, like they mentioned, we've got tutorials, things in the practical skill lab, com skills workshops. So all of this sort of adds together to help you feel more and more prepared for working as a doctor. In terms of other things that we do aside from the course, because I'm sure you've heard a lot about that, I think the nice thing about Oxford is that you can get involved at things in different levels. So you can either be involved at like university level in terms of different sports teams, music and drama and societies, But if you want to do something slightly smaller scale, you can be involved in colleges, and the MCR is kind of like the postgraduate, I guess, society at your college. And there's a range of different college events as well. And then if you want to just do stuff, as I think as you get into clinical years, your timetable does become a bit more variable. So specific med related societies can be really good. And that can involve volunteering or like committees more tailored to your medical interest, or just sports and music. And I think one real thing that I've particularly enjoyed is Tindwick, which is the medical pantomime, the med school pantomime. And usually it has a very sort of incomprehensible plot, or, you know, it's a slightly comprehensible plot. And everyone in your year sort of acts in it. And it's just really wonderful. And it really feels like just sort of a good representative of the community at the med school. And also some people end up having babies, which is kind of exciting. It really feels like, you know, I guess everyone's sort of growing up. But yeah, there's a lot of fun things that's happening. And for me in particular, why I love the course, I think as well as the benefits of the small group tutorials, I think one thing that's really stood out to me is that the teaching staff genuinely care about you and your learning. And that can sound kind of trite, but I think it's backed up by a lot of evidence. We have always been asked to give feedback, and it's obvious the feedback is acted on. There are student committees who sort of tell us what's happened from those feedback sessions, and the course is continuously improving. They're incredibly supportive and just really enthusiastic. So if you want to explore your interests or have additional questions, then there's a lot that you can follow up with your lecturers about. And I think in general, the nice thing about being in medicine and also being in Oxford is you're just surrounded by interesting people with niche fun interests, whether that's your other course mates, whether that's postgrads at your college, or like the teaching staff or doctors on placement. I think people are just genuinely interesting and interested in you. And I think it kind of just forms a really lovely, supportive environment where you feel like you can get the most out of your time at Oxford as well. And there's a great sense of community too. We've talked a bit about the research in the ASIP. There's also an opportunity to get involved in a bit more medical education as you get into final year. And that's really lovely too, where you can support some of the undergrads. I think there's good financial support depending on different types of bursaries as well. So that's something worth looking into if it's something you want to think about. And also in general, Oxford is a really beautiful city. It has so much to offer beyond the medicine course, even though the course is wonderful. So I think you can just make the most of your time here in, I think, the way that works for you. There's no sort of pigeonholed route, and I think that's really lovely. We have a few videos about other people's favourite things about being a gem, so I'm just going to play them quickly. They're very brief.
But we can't hear the sound.
Oh, okay. I'll just summarise what he said. I'm not sure how to make the sound come out. He just said he enjoyed the fact that there's dedicated research time in first and second year, which is something you guys have already talked about. And the next one, I will summarise them too. But this is a group of people, I think they have graduated now, saying how much they love the people in the GEM course, and they like the fact that there's ability to structure it themselves. And I think someone said there's really good hikes and open water swimming. So if that's what you're interested to, there's that as well. And this final one, can you I'm sure you can't hear this, can you?
You might have to summarize that for as well.
That's all right. I think I included this one, well, Steph included this from Ricardo, and then I wanted to keep it because he said that the experience here is amazing and the different people are wonderful. And the way the course is structured and the way the university is allows you to sort of build the experience of med school that you want. And I think that's the best thing, is that you can make what you want from it, and you can get as much out of the course as you want, and the people around you really want to facilitate you doing that. So I think it's something I feel incredibly grateful for, and hopefully something you would enjoy as well if you were to come here. But yeah, this is the end of my PowerPoint. And if you have any questions, do feel free to ask.
Anna, thanks very much for joining us. That was great. and hopefully some people will have some questions. So that was really the end of our formal set of talks. We've got about sort of 10 minutes to finish off. Anna, are you okay to stay with us for another 10
Yes,
minutes or,
yeah.
or so? And we'll bring Tom back on and bring Richard back on as well. So we'll just use the last 10 minutes or so to pick up on some questions that anybody had. Richard, can you see the questions?
Yeah, I've been busy answering them, David.
Great.
Here is one that I have left for Tom and Anna. How did you balance the heavy workload with extracurriculars or college life? Anna, would you like to start as a current student?
Well, I'd say to begin with, not very well. In that I think I did a bit too much of the extracurriculars and less of the course. But I think as time goes on, you just work out how much you really need to know. And I think if you need support around that, there's actually, people you can turn to. But the main thing is, I think, being aware, making sure I know what the content is, the core content that we have to be examined on, and then starting to fit things that I wanted around that. And I think as you go on, you get a much better balance of how to do that. I think just don't, like some people do spend the entire first year just in their books. And I think, there is more to offer in Oxford than just medicine.
Thanks. Tom?
Yeah, so to be honest, for the first year I was in Oxford was when the first COVID lockdown hit, so there wasn't much else to do other than revise, to be honest. But I would say have confidence in the fact that you are coming to this course as graduates, so you should already have a quite good understanding of, how you work well, which methods work best for you, and obviously whilst it is intense and a lot is expected of you and you will cover a lot of material, particularly in that first year and a half, I would say you do still have plenty of time. As Anna says, it's not like you do need to be sat in the library 5 days a week, not ever doing anything else. You will have time to do other things as well, but I think that is probably ties into what I said earlier about it being a good course for if you are good at managing your own time, because that does play into it. So it is fundamentally down to you at the end of the day to be the one to work out, do I maybe skip this particular event tonight and prioritize work, or vice versa? And if you prefer to do that, then I think this course will probably suit you pretty well. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
I might leave the questions in your hands, Richard, if that's all right.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know you have another commitment. Do go. So yes, please do. Okay, bye, David. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us. So good to see everybody. Bye bye.
Well, we'll just spend the last 10 or 15 minutes, if that's okay, rounding off the questions. Or let me start with you, Anna. Is there anything else you'd like to say with a little bit of time left that you didn't cover in your talk? Perhaps not.
I'm not sure. I think that was the main stuff. The main thing is just it can be whatever you want it to be. Obviously, you have the course structure, but if there are things that you like, if there are interests that you have, I think the best thing to do is to kind of ask the course people about it and see if that can be facilitated. And you can do this sort of research alongside, or if you have other commitments, it can all work. It's just you do have to be strict in the first year. Oh, another thing is it gets better. The first year is the toughest, I think, but as you go along, I think the knowledge all starts to slot together, and things you find confusing in first year, it's kind of like that spiral learning. You start to have that baseline and you build on top of each other, and it gets really satisfying as it goes along. So I think even if you do first year and you find it tough, I think it will improve. And that's just the way the first year is, what you say, the sort of accelerated part, not the condensed bit.
Yes. Tom, is there anything else you'd like to say, given that we have a little bit of time left over?
Yes, I would agree with what Anna just said there. Actually, it probably starts more intense and then gets easier as things do sort of combine and give you, and you become more aware of how everything links together. So Richard touched upon your first year clinical examinations and all of that, those things that you start practicing as early as the first few weeks and months, and a lot of that actually doesn't really click in your head until you start applying the knowledge of the cardiology and respiratory modules later on in that first year. But it is really rewarding when that all does start coming together. I still get, I do still get a lot of enjoyment and reward from even now as having done a year as a doctor of arriving at a scene and using the knowledge that you've gained during this course to kind of sort out a solution to that problem in that scenario. And one other thing I would also say is the fact that you are put into those clinical scenarios really early on, in the form of going to the GP, going to the hospital in your first year Wednesdays. It really, I cannot emphasize how good a stead that stands you in for when you start working as a doctor, because I would say over half of the problems and conflicts and things that arise on the wards are down to the human elements of things. They're not due to medical issues or clinical problems that need to be sorted. They are fundamentally kind of communication errors. And I think obviously I'm going to be very biased, but I think from my experience, the course does set you up very well to deal with a lot of those issues.
Oh, Richard, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm muted because I was tapping away answering some of the specific questions. Anna, can I get you to answer the question that Tom asked? Why did you choose Oxford or aim for Oxford? Tom answered, sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't. So I guess for context, I didn't go to Oxford before doing grad med. I think I was actually a little bit hesitant. There was a few different places I was interested in. I liked the way the Oxford course had the clinical stuff straight from the start in the first year on the Wednesdays. I thought that was really attractive. I liked also how it had the research element. And at the time, I think I was interested in the sort of like clinician researcher type thing. I'm not sure if I want to, do heavy research anymore, but that's just because of my own personal preferences. But I really liked how the course facilitated that if that was something you were interested in. And I think also Oxford is a very beautiful city. It was very different to the places I've been to before. And I thought it'd be nice to have a change of scene.
Great, that's very honest. So a mixed set of sort of experiences and hopes that have led you towards Oxford. I'll just read some unless either of you want to volunteer or anything else, I'll just go through some of the questions I haven't had a chance to get to yet. An anonymous user has put in 5 questions. Any age cut-off for applicants? No. What marks will be required for South African grads? Or, can't tell you off the top of my head, sorry, if you can translate that into a GPA, that would be helpful, or we can look it up, I guess. How much does one's non-medical work experience count positively towards the application? Do you want to answer that, Tom? How much does one's non-medical work experience count positively towards the application?
Yeah, I think it can contribute a really big, large amount, to be honest. So I think, as Anna mentioned in her talk, one of the things that I do think you get the sense from Oxford at the interview stage is that they are looking at you overall as a person. They're not looking at just your academic potential, just your potential to become a good doctor. They're looking at you as an overall human being. And obviously who you are is formed by all the experiences that you've had up to this point. So for example, in my spare time, I've sort of been involved in sort of music. I've played quite a lot of sport, specifically rugby. And a lot of that really stands you in good stead if you have, more strings to your bow, as it were. The best doctors are not people who are purely good problem solvers and good with the science and the knowledge. They're people who can blend that into, also being a very approachable, down to earth and decent person. So I think the fact that they very much put that on an even keel with, the academic side is hugely important. And so I wouldn't I wouldn't ever take away from that it is really, really key when they can consider who they're going to offer places to here.
Okay. Anna, anything to say on that point?
Oh, well, I agree with a lot of what Thomas said. I think that just think about the experiences that you've had and what you've learned from them, and the fact that you can get a lot of very important skills from non-medical things, and having some of like being able to reflect on those at interview and in your personal statement is really useful, and actually can set you apart from other applicants as well. So don't be put off by not having sort of very extensive medical CV, because you can still have lots of valuable skills from it.
Thank you. I think it would be fair to say that the course takes people from, okay, it's a graduate entry medicine course, so the demographic is quite limited, but within that demographic, we do take people with some varied CVs, perhaps bioscience degrees, DPhils, PhDs. Masters are the more obvious ones, but we've have people who've worked in veterinary medicine for some years. A successful equine vet comes to mind, and she was actually leading the course survey, the career tracking survey that I referenced in one of my responses. People who've worked in the city occasionally, alongside people who have a whole lot of really solid clinical experience. Just out of courtesy, to complete the last questions from the multiple questioner, cut-off date for who've completed the UCAT, David covered that. For someone who graduated more than 10 years ago, are extra tests required? I would answer that by saying only for yourself. You need to really test your commitment and look at what you're giving up. We have had, I can think of someone a few years ago who had a family, a young family, and was really determined to study medicine. I don't know how long it was since they had graduated, but quite a few years. But actually, the kind of cost in holistic terms to them of doing the course was too high, particularly in terms of having to move their family home up from elsewhere, and so they started the course but withdrew, which I felt sad for them, and also sad perhaps for the person that they might have displaced. So that's sort of honest answer there from me. Then there were some questions that were too difficult for me to answer. Let me just look back to those. To what extent does the college you attend affect your experience? I think we covered that. For me, it's more about the student than it is about the college. You make the best. Here we go. Would the access to HE, higher education in medicine, be an acceptable substitute to A levels, given that the applicant has a first class degree in psychology? So the answer is I don't know, but as I put in one of my other, so you could email the course administrator, and we could answer that. But we have students with the occasional student with a 2-2 pass degree, but who then has demonstrated academic excellence. The person I'm thinking of went on to do a master's, had very particular reasons why they didn't do well in their 2-2, and then went on to do a PhD and really demonstrated academic excellence and thrived on the course. So I think I have answered all your questions. Does a degree in bioengineering with placement year count as an experimental science degree? Well, it might do. You tell us. Is it an experimental science degree? If it's just in inverted commas theoretical, then no. But if there's an experimental component, then yes. Right. How are we doing for time? We're just 2 minutes to 4. James, as a sort of a seasoned administrator, familiar with the course on both sides, is there anything you'd like to add or even subtract from what we've said?
Wasn't expecting that. Thank you, Richard.
No, okay. I answered the question very slowly.
I just reiterate the point that you've made, that if you've got very specific questions, if you could send us an email, and we'll do our best to respond to you.
Yeah. So I think the course is really fortunate with the high caliber of technical and administrative support we have alongside the teachers. And on that slightly creepy note, should we call it a day? I hope it's a bit of interest. I'm impressed. There's nearly 30 of you, or of us, still in the meeting. I hope it's been a bit of help. Really think carefully about what you want to do, why, where you want to do it, and that question around how much work experience do I need? Well, my answer is that you need the amount of work experience that convinces you that a career in medicine is the right one. So convince yourself and you will convince us. Shall we go?